bizarre, unsubtle. We must be talking about a mid-80s Japanese movie. And you're right, we are. We're talking Entrails of a Beautiful Woman, also known as Guts of a Beauty. And that is, of course, the English translations of this Japanese movie. I'm not going to try and pronounce the Japanese pronunciation of it because it will just be a disaster. Suffice to say, the director here also directed a movie called Entrails of a Virgin, which is a similar but unrelated movie as far as I'm aware. And this is a weird film. It's kind of like, how to explain it? It essentially focuses on the Yakuza who are doing human trafficking for sex slave purposes. And they come afoul of this female psychiatrist who's trying to help one of their victims. And she kind of ends up, you know, rubbing the wrong side of this particular Yakuza gang and is kind of executed by them, but comes back as a kind of monster, like a Hulk monster, where she kind of turns into this kind of hermaphrodite, skinless creature with both male and female sex organs, both of which it uses to kind of kill its victims. And that's kind of the movie. Yeah, bit of a weird one. What can we say that works? If you like a bit of a weird one, then check it out. It's really bizarre. Something like this could really only come out of Japan. I mean, it's very odd. It has this kind of sexual tone all the way through it. It's a very sexually charged movie with a lot of kind of like rape sequences and things like this. And I've got to be honest with you, the majority of the running time, if you say what is the most kind of amount of running time in this movie, what particular scenes, it's sex scenes or sexual related scenes. There's a lot of it here. In actual fact, the plot is quite scant because it spends a lot of its time having these kind of softcore kind of sex sequences and things like that. I will say, you know, even though the plot is kind of bizarre, you can still kind of follow it. I find some Japanese films can be a little bit kind of hard to follow sometimes. Some of the characters, I will say, even though they don't have a huge amount of characterization, they are still kind of quite memorable. I was still, you know, I did sort of keep track of who everyone was and kind of like, you know, you've got an idea that this guy's the boss, he's the kind of the serious one, he's got his second in command, he's got these two goofy ones, he's got this, you know, so you get an idea of the kind of the characters, even though it's only snippets really, but at least the characters are kind of somewhat kind of memorable. And I have to say, despite this movie is clearly very, very low budget, it's certainly very inventive with some of the effects, and it's kind of gross at times as well. The effects aren't brilliant, and I'm going to come on to that as well, but it does use them quite effectively. There's quite a lot of kind of like rape scenes in here, so obviously that's not something you're comfortable with. That, you know, you might want to avoid this one because there's a lot of it in this movie. And like these kind of rape revenge movies, they're obviously a matter of taste. I mean, some people you might say is misogynistic, others so it's kind of someone kind of fighting back and killing these guys, and therefore it's empowering. So you make your own mind about that, but it is quite strong. There's quite a lot of kind of sexual violence, and you know, some of it, I've got to say, the way it's filmed, people getting whipped and things and thrown around and forcibly raped, it's fairly kind of like realistic in some aspects, despite some of the cheesiness and kind of silliness of some of the other sequences. But certainly I would say the kind of the sexual kind of violence scenes are actually kind of quite sort of realistic, and you know, the people there it looks like it's kind of happening. I gotta be honest with you. And it's interesting to see this kind of like this little, because you spend a lot of time with this Yakuza, are actually more than the actual protagonist, to be completely honest. So you do get an idea of this kind of little like middle management guy who's our kind of main bad guy in the movie. But you don't feel like he's this like massive mafia, you know, Yakuza boss. He's like the middle management guy looking after his own crew, and you know, he answers to someone, and he has his kind of his second command and his goons and things like that. So you get a bit of an idea about how it's kind of like this little snippet of how this kind of organisation works. And I thought it did kind of shine the light on, you know, it was a kind of good portrayal of how, you know, inhumane these kind of people are, if that makes sense. And it does definitely vilify them, and I wouldn't say it kind of sort of sensationalises it in any way. It kind of does. These people are treating like these women are like literally like pieces of meat, like objects. There's no kind of like sense of humanity there, no kind of trying to kind of make them feel better and things like that. They're just like, just get them out, you know, ship them out, have your fun with them, and then like send them off, that kind of stuff. So it's kind of, it's quite hard going in some aspects, but there's sort of the cheesiness and the over kind of bizarreness of this movie does kind of offset it. Let's talk about what doesn't work in this movie. I mean, it's quite a cheap movie, and like I said, it's a mid-80s Japanese movie. It's certainly like a B film, you know. The effects here are real kind of like cheesy and cheap. Our monster, who I have to be honest with you, is quite poorly introduced. It's just like, yeah, it just kind of happens. They have this kind of drug that they're using when the only kind of reason why we have this monster is that they overdosed this girl with this particular drug, and that's it. Now she's a monster because she was buried with someone else or something. Yeah, there's no real kind of like building of how that actually happened. The actual creature itself, it looks like a guy with like, I don't know, pizza sauce all over them, this creature. But like I said, there's some interesting, it uses its sexual bits for some interesting kills, I will say. But the creature actually isn't on screen all that much, to be honest with you. It almost feels like it's a bit forced in there. Arguably, you could say it was kind of an interesting kind of crime drama, more so than a monster movie. Before you even get to this kind of like this monster sort of section, it kind of feels a little bit more like this psychiatrist is trying to pit her wits against this kind of Yakuza and stuff, and that to me was more interesting. The actual monster stuff of it, I don't know. It just kind of came out of nowhere, looks crappy, and just seemed to be there for excessive grossness, if that makes sense. It kind of didn't really fit with the first two acts of the movie, if you ask me. Weirdly kind of introduced. The characters are a mixed bag. There's not much characterization from them. They are memorable, but they're kind of like, they range from Mr. Stoic never takes his glasses off to kind of goofy kind of like foot soldier type guys who are just kind of like, you know, joke kind of characters, but still kind of horrible and things like that. I gotta say that if I had to have one main critique of this movie though, is our main protagonist is virtually kind of has no character of her own. And this maybe speaks to the problem with how you see this movie in a kind of a misogynistic way, because although this kind of our gang are treated as bad guys and they're getting their comeuppance and they're paying for their crimes, but we see a lot of that. There's a lot of rape scenes here, but our female protagonist, I feel, gets very little kind of characterization. In fact, she's not even introduced until a little ways into the movie, and then we don't really know much about her. We don't really spend a lot of time with her, and so therefore it comes across, we actually spend more time with our bad guys. So yeah, maybe it's a little bit kind of its time, shall we say. There's some technical issues here outside of the effects. There's some horrible abrasive edits. Some of the kind of the camera work and audio isn't great. Certainly not a movie for everyone. It's going to be a tasting whether you kind of want to watch a film like this. It is quite strong, certainly in regards to its sexual violence. Its actual gore scenes are actually very goofy. You know, we have rubbery kind of like hands and things that are being chopped off, very kind of fake looking, but the actual violence to the women is more realistic. So there you go. I'm gonna have to give one a 4 out of 10. It was a little bit kind of, you know, it's gonna be a tasting for many people. 4 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.